Ilara Vance believed in the quiet dignity of a job well done. At 42, she was the head housekeeper of the Albright family's sprawling New England estate, a position she'd earned through a combination of relentless efficiency, impeccable discretion, and an almost supernatural ability to anticipate needs before they arose. To the Albright staff, she was a firm but fair commander, the silent engine that kept the grand machine of the household running flawlessly. To the Albrights themselves, she was, for the most part, invisible. Her own story was one she kept folded away, like a treasured letter. She hadn't been born into the world of service. She'd clawed her way to a scholarship at a top university, earning a degree in political science and public relations. For a decade, she had moved in very different circles in a life that was a world away from polishing silver and managing laundry schedules. But a family crisis had forced her to retreat from that world, seeking a role that offered stability and, most importantly, anonymity. She found it in household management, a field where her organizational genius could shine without the glare of a public spotlight. She started as a junior housekeeper for an old money family in Boston and, through sheer talent, rose through the ranks. Now at the Albright estate, she commanded a staff of 20 and a budget that rivaled a small corporation's. She took pride in her work, in the gleam of the parquet floors and the crispness of the table linens. It was an honest, honorable life. The matriarch of the family, Beatrice Albright, lived in a world constructed of pedigree and perception. Her fortune hadn't been earned, it had been inherited, passed down through 3 generations of shipping magnates. She wore her wealth not with grace but as armor. Beatrice believed fervently in the natural hierarchy of the world. There were people like her, born to lead and to be served, and then there was everyone else. She judged individuals not by their character, but by their last name, the clubs they belonged to, and the postcodes they inhabited. She saw Ilara not as the highly competent manager of her home, but as a ghost in a gray uniform, a necessary but unremarkable fixture. The implicit friction between the two women simmered just beneath the surface of their daily interactions. It was there in the way Beatrice would walk past Ilara in the hall without a flicker of acknowledgement, or in the way she would issue directives not to Ilara herself, but to the air in the room Ilara happened to occupy. This tension was particularly palpable in the frantic days leading up to the Albrights' annual garden party, the crown jewel of the local social calendar. Ilara had been working 18-hour days, coordinating everything from the floral arrangements to the valet parking. Every detail was a testament to her meticulous planning. The marquee was draped in silk, the champagne was chilled to the precise degree, and the string quartet had been sourced from the State Symphony. On the morning of the party, Beatrice swept into the grand dining room where Ilara was personally inspecting the placement of the name cards. Beatrice, dressed in a silk dressing gown that cost more than Ilara's monthly salary, picked up a card, her lip curling slightly. "The Callahans are far too close to the Ainsworths," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Richard Callahan had that dreadful business with their son last year. It simply won't do. Move them." She didn't look at Ilara, instead addressing the centerpiece of peonies as if it were her interlocutor. "Ma'am," Ilara began, her voice calm and even. "I took the liberty of reviewing the guest dynamics. Placing the Callahans at table 7 ensures they are buffered by the Thompsons, who are famously diplomatic. It will prevent any potential awkwardness." She had, in fact, spent hours mapping out the social chessboard to ensure a smooth event. Beatrice finally turned her gaze on Ilara, but it was a look of pure dismissal, as if a piece of furniture had spoken. "I don't recall asking for your analysis," she said, her voice as cold as ice. "You are the housekeeper. Your job is to ensure the house is clean and my instructions are followed. It is not to analyze guest dynamics. Do as I say." Without another word, Beatrice set the card down and glided out of the room, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and quiet humiliation in her wake. Ilara stood perfectly still for a moment, her jaw tight. It wasn't the command that stung, it was the casual, complete erasure of her expertise. Beatrice hadn't just disagreed with her, she had made it clear that her opinion, her thoughts, her very competence were worthless. Ilara took a slow, deep breath, her professional mask sliding perfectly back into place. She picked up the name cards for the Callahans and the Ainsworths and with a steady hand swapped them. The party had to be perfect. Her own feelings were an irrelevant, invisible detail. The garden party unfolded exactly as Ilara had planned, a symphony of quiet elegance and seamless service. Waitstaff moved like phantoms through the manicured lawns, refilling glasses of vintage champagne. The string quartet played Vivaldi, their notes mingling with the polite laughter of New England's elite. From her discreet position near the French doors leading to the terrace, Ilara supervised everything, a general watching her battle plan executed to perfection. For a few hours, the smooth running of the event was a vindication in itself. The flashpoint, when it came, was small and almost insignificant. A guest, Mr. Sterling, a man known for his rather boorish behavior after a few drinks, cornered a young, nervous waitress, loudly complaining that the Chateau Margaux being served was not the vintage he had been promised. It was a baseless complaint. Elara had personally checked the inventory that morning. Before the flustered waitress could even formulate a response, Beatrice Albright materialized, her smile as sharp as a shard of glass. She thrived on such minor dramas, seeing them as opportunities to assert her dominance. "Is there a problem, Mr. Sterling?" she cooed, placing a proprietary hand on his arm. "This wine?" Beatrice Sterling slurred, gesturing with his glass. "It's not the 09. I can tell." Beatrice's eyes scanned the crowd, ensuring she had a sufficient audience. They landed on Elara, who was already moving forward, intending to handle the situation quietly and professionally. Beatrice raised her voice, a clear, carrying tone designed to cut through the ambient chatter. "Oh, there you are," she called out, beckoning Elara with an imperious flick of her fingers. "Our housekeeper. Perhaps she can explain this discrepancy." A bubble of silence expanded around them as guests turned to watch. Elara felt 100 pairs of eyes settle on her gray uniform. She maintained a placid expression, her hands clasped calmly behind her back. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Albright, Mr. Sterling. I can assure you, sir, that this is indeed the 2009 Chateau Margaux, decanted this afternoon. Perhaps I can fetch you the bottle to inspect?" Her voice was low and respectful, a deliberate attempt to de-escalate, to pull the interaction back from the precipice of a scene. But Beatrice had no intention of backing down. She saw an opportunity to reinforce the natural order of her world. "The bottle," she laughed, a brittle, unpleasant sound. "My dear woman, you missed the point. Mr. Sterling is a connoisseur. He is questioning the quality, something you couldn't possibly comprehend. What does a housekeeper know of a premier cru Bordeaux?" The insult was clear, a direct shot at Elara's station. A murmur went through the nearby guests. Elara felt a hot flush creep up her neck, but her voice remained steady. "I understand, ma'am. My role is simply to ensure that what was ordered is what is served. And I can personally attest to that fact." Beatrice stepped closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial, yet still very public, whisper. "Your role," she repeated, savoring the word with theatrical contempt. "Your role is to manage the maids and the dustbins. You were a waitress yourself before this, were you not? Or was it a nanny? I can never keep track of the humble beginnings of the staff." She waved a dismissive hand. "It is utterly presumptuous of you to think you can stand here and contradict a guest of my stature. You are service staff. You are here to serve, not to attest. The public humiliation was complete. Beatrice wasn't just questioning her knowledge. She was stripping Elara of her title, her authority, and her dignity, reducing her to nothing more than a nameless, faceless servant with a dimly remembered, lowly past. She was attempting to erase the capable, respected head housekeeper and replace her with the caricature of an uppity maid. Elara stood frozen in a pool of mortified silence. She felt the weight of every gaze, saw the pity in some, the faint smirk of agreement in others. Her staff, standing at the edges of the terrace, looked on with helpless horror. In that moment, she was utterly isolated. The world she had so carefully built, a world of professional respect earned through sheer competence, felt as fragile as spun glass. She tried to speak, to defend herself, but what could she say? Beatrice wasn't interested in the truth. She was interested in subjugation. "You are to apologize to Mr. Sterling for the confusion," Beatrice commanded, her voice ringing with triumph. "And then you are to return to the kitchens where you belong. I will handle this." The injustice of it was a physical blow. Apologize for being correct? Retreat in disgrace because her employer was a snob? Every fiber of her being screamed in protest. She had run crisis communications for senators, managed diplomatic events with dignitaries, handled situations 1,000 times more complex and delicate than a drunk guest complaining about wine. And here she was, being publicly dressed down, rendered speechless and powerless by a woman whose only significant life achievement was being born. She looked at the faces in the crowd, the bankers, the lawyers, the socialites, and saw no allies. They were Beatrice's people. In their world, Elara Vance, head housekeeper, was and would always be just the help. With a barely perceptible nod, burning with a shame that felt like acid, Elara turned to walk away. As Elara took the first step of her walk of shame, a voice, calm and full of authority, cut through the tense silence. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding." The voice belonged to a woman who had just stepped out onto the terrace from the main house. She was in her late 50s with sharp, intelligent eyes and an air of purpose that made people instinctively take notice. Her pantsuit was impeccably tailored but practical, a stark contrast to the frothy pastels and designer labels worn by most of the female guests. This was Senator Catherine Richmond, a woman renowned throughout the state and beyond. A self-made powerhouse, she had started as a public defender and was now one of the most respected figures in Washington, known for her sharp intellect and intolerance for fools. She had arrived late and had been making her way through the house to greet her host when she overheard Beatrice's tirade. Every head turned towards her. Even Beatrice, mid-triumph, looked momentarily flustered by the unexpected arrival of the guest of honor. "Senator Richmond." "Catherine, how wonderful of you to come," Beatrice gushed, her voice instantly shifting from cruel to sycophantic. She moved to embrace the senator, attempting to draw her into her circle and away from the unpleasantness with the staff. But the senator's attention was fixed on Alara. Her eyes, which had been scanning the scene, now lit up with genuine surprise and warmth. "I thought that was you," she said, her voice carrying across the lawn. "Alara Vance. My God, it's been years. You look wonderful." She walked directly past the stunned Beatrice and stopped in front of Alara, extending her hand not as a superior to a subordinate, but as an equal greeting an old and respected colleague. Alara, momentarily shocked out of her humiliation, took the senator's hand. "Senator, it's an honor to see you again." Beatrice watched, her smile frozen on her face, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. "You two know each other?" she asked, a nervous laugh fluttering in her throat. Senator Richmond turned to face Beatrice, her warm expression hardening into something cool and appraising. "Know her?" The senator's voice was no longer conversational. It was the precise, projecting tone she used on the Senate floor when about to dismantle an opponent's argument. "Mrs. Albright, for 3 years, Alara Vance was my senior advisor on intergovernmental affairs. Before that, she was the youngest director of communications for the governor. I once watched this woman single-handedly avert a tri-state transportation strike with 2 phone calls and a press release she drafted on a cocktail napkin." A collective gasp went through the crowd. The silence was no longer awkward, it was electric. Mr. Sterling, the complaining guest, suddenly seemed very sober, trying to melt into the background. The senator wasn't finished. She gestured toward the party, a sweeping motion that took in the perfect flowers, the attentive staff, the flawless execution of the entire affair. "When my chief of staff told me you had the best household manager in New England, I should have guessed it was Alara. There isn't a crisis she can't manage or an organization she can't run with terrifying efficiency. When she left Washington to handle a private family matter, it was considered a significant loss. We tried for a year to get her back." She then turned her piercing gaze directly onto Beatrice. "So, to answer your earlier, rather loud question," the senator continued, her voice dripping with controlled indignation, "what does a housekeeper know of a premier cru Bordeaux? Well, I can't speak for all of them. But I know for a fact that this one, Alara Vance, successfully negotiated a trade addendum with the French agricultural attaché over a bottle of 1982 Petrus. So I suspect her knowledge is more than adequate." The reversal was absolute and devastating. Beatrice Albright stood as if turned to stone, her face pale, her mouth slightly agape. She had not merely insulted her housekeeper. In her arrogant blindness, she had publicly humiliated a highly accomplished political strategist in front of the very people she so desperately wanted to impress. She had exposed her own ignorance, her own prejudice, in the most spectacular way possible. The foundation of her social standing, the perception of her own superior judgment, crumbled to dust in that single, stunning moment. Alara felt the weight of 100 pairs of eyes on her again, but this time it was different. The pity was gone, replaced by awe, respect, and a frantic recalculation. They weren't looking at a servant anymore. They were looking at a hidden power player, a woman of substance who had been masquerading in plain sight. Senator Richmond gave Alara's hand a final, supportive squeeze. "It's a testament to your character that you bring your immense talents to a role like this and perform it with such grace, Alara," she said, loudly enough for everyone to hear. "True professionalism is a rare thing indeed." With that, she had not only restored Alara's dignity but elevated it, framing her choice not as a fall from grace, but as an act of profound, quiet integrity. The senator's words hung in the air, rearranging the social molecules of the entire party. The silence that followed was broken by a smattering of awkward applause, a spontaneous tribute to the drama and to Alara herself. Guests who had previously looked through her now sought her gaze, their expressions a mixture of apology and awe. Mr. Sterling looked as if he wanted the manicured lawn to swallow him whole. But the most meaningful shift came from Alara's own staff. The young waitress who had been the initial target of the complaint was looking at Alara with tears in her eyes, her expression one of fierce pride. The other staff members, positioned around the periphery, stood taller. Their boss hadn't just been defended, she had been revealed as a titan in their midst. In that moment, Alara's authority was no longer based merely on her title as head housekeeper. It was forged in the fires of this public vindication. Their loyalty, already strong, was now absolute. All eyes eventually turned to the pale, trembling figure of Beatrice Albright. Her meticulously crafted world of effortless superiority had been shattered. She was exposed as not just a snob but a fool. She had held up a priceless diamond and declared it to be a piece of common glass. The senator, a woman Beatrice had been desperate to impress, was looking at her with undisguised contempt. Stammering, Beatrice finally found her voice, a pathetic version of its usual commanding tone. I had no idea, she whispered, looking at Alara. I apologize. It was a misunderstanding. It was a weak, flimsy apology, born of utter social terror rather than genuine remorse, and everyone knew it. Without waiting for a response, she turned and fled, practically running back into the house, abandoning her own party in utter disgrace. The hostess had deserted the ship she herself had scuttled. In the ensuing quiet, Senator Richmond turned back to Alara, her expression softening. Now, she said with a wry smile, I came here for a glass of that excellent wine and a conversation with my hostess. Since she seems to have evaporated, perhaps you'll join me, Alara? I'm sure your staff can handle things from here. It was an invitation that was also a declaration. The senator was publicly seating Alara at the table, not as staff but as a peer. Alara, feeling the tight knot of humiliation in her chest finally dissolve, gave a grateful nod. I would be honored, Senator. They sat at a small table away from the crowd, but everyone watched as the senator and the head housekeeper spoke with the ease of old friends. Catherine Richmond didn't mince words. This is no place for you, Alara, she said, her voice low. I respected your reasons for leaving Washington, but your talents are being wasted here. Polishing silver for women who can't see past the shine. She leaned forward, her expression serious. I'm launching a new nonprofit initiative next year. It's an ambitious public-private partnership focused on leadership training for women from disadvantaged backgrounds. It needs a director with political savvy, logistical genius, and nerves of steel. Someone who understands how to build something from the ground up and won't be intimidated by anyone. It needs you. The funding is already secured. The position is yours if you want it. The offer landed in Alara's soul like a key turning in a long-locked door. It was everything she had once been and everything she could be again, but on her own terms. It wasn't a retreat to her old life, but a progression to a new one where her skills would be used not to create a bubble of comfort for the wealthy, but to build ladders for others. The incident, which began as her deepest professional humiliation, had become the catalyst for her greatest opportunity. It reaffirmed everything she believed in. That substance would always eventually triumph over superficiality. Character was the only currency that truly mattered. Senator, Alara said, a slow, genuine smile spreading across her face for the first time that day. I accept.